Welcome to this introduction to iridology. Many of you are probably new to iridology, have heard about it, but would like a little more information to see if it's something you might want to add to your toolkit. So today I'm going to introduce you to the science of constitutional iridology and to share with you briefly how this can enhance your wellness and health coaching business. By way of introduction, my name is Judith Cobb. I have been a holistic health coach for 4 decades. I started out with the North American style of iridology, and about 30 years ago, I jumped ship and went over to the constitutional style. I am a level 3 certified comprehensive iridology instructor with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. That is the highest level of instructor credential they grant, and I am one of only 5 level 3 instructors in the world. Over the years that I have been a holistic health coach, I have added many credentials. I hold credentials that allow me to be a professional member of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners, and I know you're familiar with both of those. I am also a professional member of the Alberta Herbalists Association because I am also a master herbalist. I'm going to answer 4 key questions for you today. What is iridology? Why does it work? What can it teach us? And how should it be used? Iridology is the science of studying the iris of the eye. That is the colored part of the iris. We see many different eye colors. There's many different ways the fiber can sit in the eye. There's many different pigments that can be sitting in the eye as well. These are all a part of iridology. You may hear some people pronounce it iridology. The correct pronunciation is iridology. Modern iridologists also often include the study of the sclera, or the white of the eye. That is known as sclerology, where the iris of the eye is genetically determined. It teaches us where a person has inherent strengths and weaknesses. The sclera is very situational. The sclera is very responsive. You know this if you've had a good hard cry and your eyes have gone bloodshot. That's a situational change that corrects itself very quickly. Splash some cold water on your face, wait 20 minutes, and the blood vessels will settle down. These blood vessels in the sclera respond to other things in our body as well and can therefore give us more information about what is going on right now. When we look at the iris, we need to start with understanding the eye. And I know you've got a strong foundation in anatomy and physiology, so this will be a quick review for you. The eyeball is the largest neural receptor of the body, and it is connected directly to the brain via the optic nerves. We know that the iris has over 28,000 nerve endings. We're not sure what they all do yet. The eye develops as a part of the nervous system embryologically at the same time the brain develops. So if there is something going on genetically that the brain knows about, there may be an indicator show up in that person's eyes. Now, we don't always see this 100% of the time, but we see it a lot of the time. And so it can be a good guide for us. We know that the irides change in certain ways with time, but they do not change as the result of improving your diet, for instance. When we see a set of eyes, again, we're going to focus on the constitutional style of iridology, which is different from many of the other styles that are out there. We learn much about the person. So this was a client in her early 50s, and I looked at her eyes. I noticed some things that would give me information. So let's start with constitutional markers. We often don't even need to use an iris map. When we look at this person's eyes and we see these rings coming around, these tell us this person functions primarily in her sympathetic nervous system. And as such, we know she spends a lot of time fight, flight, or freeze. Now, you know that when a person spends a lot of time in that system, their adrenal glands can be stressed. They can become depleted. And so when we see this in the eyes, one of the things we may want to do If you've got herbal background, you could use an adaptogen. If you're working with nutrition, you can choose foods that are rich in B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium, and you can help this client to learn about the benefit of using adequate protein. Now, this client actually came to me with recurring bladder infections and allergies, and she wanted help with both of those. As I look at her eyes, what I see is an increased risk of allergies. When we have this brown pigment sitting towards the center of the eye, that suggests that her liver may have an attitude problem. Probably perfectly capable of doing its job, but it likes to say, yeah, I can do that, make me. Right? And so when we have that, you know that the allergies, that the liver does a lot of things to mediate allergies. We also know that the liver plays some key roles with the immune response. She has recurring bladder infections. Maybe the problem isn't the bladder. Maybe the problem is immune. There may be emotional things as well, and we often talk about those things in our iridology course. What we want to do here is give her herbs or do dietary corrections that will support her liver. Use appropriate supplements, whatever your modality is. Get that liver functioning really, really well to bring the immune system back online all the way, and we will likely see a mitigation of the bladder issues. So for herbs, we might want to use golden seal because it is a really good immune building herb, and it is also a fabulous liver herb. Again, you can do lots of leafy greens. You could do beetroot. There are dietary things that we can do as well to help that liver function to the best of its ability. We need to remember that with constitutional iridology, we never diagnose. That is the realm of medical doctors. So iridology works very well with nutrition coaches and herbalists. We never diagnose and we never prescribe, but the understandings we gain by knowing what our client wants help with, understanding what we see in the eyes, and asking questions based on those two things can help us to create ideal programs for our clients to meet their current needs. When you're online looking at different iridology teachers and social media groups, you're going to find a lot of the people who are doing iris analyses will talk about, oh, you're so toxic, you need to do a cleanse, you've got a congested liver. You'll see these kinds of really bold statements. You can't tell that from looking at the eye. We can't possibly know that. We need to have a conversation with the client. The eyes are genetically set. So they tell us what the predispositions are. If this person is living a very clean life, has a very good diet, a very good lifestyle, they may be doing all of the things that are necessary to keep the liver working well. And all we see in the eye is a predisposition, right? And so this is why we never say things like you're toxic, you need to cleanse, you've got a congested liver, these eyes look really unhealthy, because we don't know that until we've had a conversation with our client and we know the context with which to assess these eyes. Here's another female client of mine. Now remember, the iris itself shows us inherent predispositions. The sclera shows us the dynamic situation. Again, we're going to focus on the iris today. We look for the collarette. It's one of the key markers in the iris. And we see that in this person's eye, that collarette is sitting very close to the pupil. That's a really key thing that we want to make a note of. Now, again, we never tell the client what they should be feeling because, for example, this tight collarette suggests this person is predisposed to things like constipation, poor energy production, but we never tell the client because the client might have figured this out already. They might already be doing the kinds of things they should be doing in order to keep their system functioning well. Now, this client was like that. She was already very diet aware. She ate small meals. She had lots of vegetables, not much grain. She was making good protein choices. She was also using digestive supports when she came to see me. So in spite of the fact that her eyes say digestion, constipation kinds of things, she already knew what to do to keep that under control. However, she too was concerned about allergies, particularly springtime allergies. When I look at her eyes, what I see is this white that is hugging the outside of the collarette, and the white that is sort of little clouds closer to the edge of the iris. This says she is more likely to experience mucousy conditions. That can often mean allergies. We were able to mitigate that. Now, because you can't stop pollen from being produced, we had to do things to strengthen her body so that those pollens wouldn't irritate her so much. Here's another client, a woman in her mid-50s. What I want you to be seeing here is how you don't need to look at every marker in the eye to assess a client. When I'm working with a client, particularly on the first few appointments, again, I find out what they want my help with. And then when I look at their eyes, I'm looking for markers that help me to understand the symptoms the client wants to be rid of. When I find those markers and correlate them to her symptoms, I know what questions to ask. And as I get those answers, I can start trimming down the recommendations that I want to make, so that the iridology portion of my entire hour-long appointment is maybe 10 minutes. And it saves me from having to use incredibly long questionnaires. In fact, I don't use a questionnaire at all. And it helps me to pinpoint precisely what my client is needing help with at this point in time. So this was a woman in her mid-50s. She had hot flashes. She already had her diet really pretty much figured out. Her 1 week link was she has a cup of coffee every day. Now, her eyes take me in a couple of different directions. First off, I'm looking at her nervous system. I'm seeing that we've got these rings coming around here, which again tells me she functions in the sympathetic response. Now, what that means is that her adrenals are likely to get a little bit fatigued or burned out. So I needed to know, how does she respond to stress? How does she sleep? What does she do to regenerate? And do her hot flashes get worse when she is under stress? And she slept well. She's got good stress coping skills. She works out moderately. She takes time for herself. But yes, her hot flashes get worse under stress. Then I noticed that she's got a basic brown eye, but she's also got a very dark brown pigment here, which all tells me that her liver wants to be a problem. It wants to be a troublemaker. Emotionally, the liver holds anger, bitterness, and resentment. So I asked her if that was a problem. She said no, she's learned to deal with that. She doesn't hold on to things anymore, so that's great. And I asked her, does she have problems digesting fats that she knows of? Do fats upset her? Does she have greasy bowel movements? And that was all good as well. So that seemed to be okay. Because her diet was really good, I wanted to hit the one thing that I thought would have the biggest impact, and that for her was the coffee. So I suggested that she might want to try doing an experiment to give up the coffee, that 1 cup of coffee a day, for 10 days and notice if it made a difference. She was willing to do that. She did the experiment. The next time I saw her, her report was that yes, when she had no coffee, she had virtually no hot flashes. This was a miracle. And I asked her, how are you going to proceed? Are you going to stay off the coffee? And she said, well, it was a miracle, but I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. I have no other vices in my life. Coffee is the only one. And darn it, I enjoy that coffee. And I would rather keep the coffee and the hot flashes than give up the coffee to get rid of hot flashes. Her choice, right? Her choice. And so certainly, I educated her as to what caffeine and coffee both do in the body and how clearly they weren't being very helpful for her, and suggested some other things that might be helpful but probably wouldn't have as much of an impact as giving up the coffee. Now, she's got a lot of other markers in her eyes that suggest liver insufficiencies, that she may not be managing her carbs properly through her liver very well, that it may be messing with her lipid profile and her cholesterol levels. And we see that in this white ring at the edge of her eye, and she's only in her 50s. She's awfully young to have a ring this predominant. We also see this purplish haze hanging off the edge of her eye on the sclera, And that suggests that there might be some circulatory challenges as well. And again, she's physically active, so that will mitigate that somewhat. But this white ring is something she has put here herself. She's built this on her own. And that suggests to me that we should be doing some liver work. Hard to do if she's not going to give up the coffee, but it is her choice. So how do we use iridology? What have you gathered from this very brief introduction? We use iridology to guide our questions. We use it to create rapport, because when you are asking questions that are very narrowly focused on your client, and they're not like a 14-page intake profile sheet that asks every random question possible, your clients feel very heard. They feel very understood. And because you are using the information they give based on the questions you created specifically for them from their eyes and their symptoms, they are more likely to follow your instructions. We use iridology to inform our recommendations, to help us understand what direction we need to go. And because we're using it this way, we can actually use it to create what I call next step programs. We all know we can create an ultimate program for our client, but those programs are often overwhelming. Clients have a hard time sticking with them. But if we can give them a couple of really tight recommendations based on their eyes and their symptoms, they can stick with that. It may not be everything they need to know for the rest of their life to be ultimately totally healthy, but it's enough to take them to the next step, and it's manageable. When they get to that next step, we can reevaluate, what are your symptoms now? How have they changed? What do those eyes, especially with the iris that has not changed, what does that tell us in this new context? What will the next steps be? And the next and the next. So it's a beautiful way to very gently create repeat clientele as well. Many of my clients have been with me for 35 and 40 years. And they'll come in for 4 or 5 appointments. We'll visit their eyes every time. And after 4 or 5 appointments, they know enough to keep them going for the next few years. They feel great, and then they get older and their body starts to come a little undone again. So they'll come back in for another 4 or 5 appointments. We'll get them back on track. And we repeat that process. And it works beautifully, and it means that I've got a very solid client base. If you would like to learn more about the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course, I invite you to reach out to me at the URL that you see on your screen, tinyurl.com/insight-call. Our next course is starting on June 2nd, and I would like to speak with you to see if this course, and maybe not the June 2nd start date if that doesn't fit for you, but to see if the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course is a good fit for you, to see if it will help you accomplish what you want for yourself and for your clients in your wellness coaching business. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Bye for now.